If God is the creator of all things, and according to the contingency argument stating that all things are created for a purpose by either an external force or by necessity out of nature, then who exactly created God? Find out in this video, coming right up. The simplest answer to who created God is nobody and nothing created God. God wasn't and isn't created by either an external force, nor was he created out of necessity. God is not a created being. If God was a created being, then he wouldn't be much of a God in the first place. And here's what I mean. You have to look at it like this. If God was created by either an external force, then that external force would have to be more powerful than God, therefore not making him all-powerful, rendering him from being called God. If God was created out of necessity by nature, then the same logic applies as before. Something other than God would have to be more powerful than he is, also rendering him from being called God. Now, what if there was another being that created God? That's a very good question, but then that being himself would be called God instead, since that being is obviously going to be more powerful and more knowledgeable than our God Yahweh. Now, you can only transgress so far back until you became to the first cause of all things. Now, one might say that what if there are two gods instead of one? But once again, this leads to there being only one true God, because for two gods to exist, either simultaneously or independently, one of them has to be lacking something that the other has, and that would lead to only one God having all the attributes of a God. And if you're following me so far, because that's a lot to sink in, let's move on to the philosophical discussion of why God could not have been a created being. First, you need to dissect the attributes of what characteristics are considered to be God. Now, this list would include, but is not limited to, perfection, without having any kind of flaws. They lack in nothing. Next is being would have to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, personal, powerful, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, moral, loving, and without any sin ever. These are the characteristics of what we call God. If God was a created being, then that means he would have been created, whether he would have been created in time or space out of material, and would be lacking in something his creator has. In order to have been created, we know God has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial just by looking at Einstein's theory of general relativity, in which it states that for anything to have come into existence, time, space, and matter has to come together at the exact same time. So before the universe even began, there was no time, there was no space, there was no material. So that tells us that whatever created the universe has to live outside those realms. There has to be an on-cause first cause. No matter how far back you decide to go, you'll always end up at the uncaused first cause, and that is who we call God, or what Aristotle referred to as the unmoved mover.